GDLS Canada, an industry leader dedicated to supporting our customers and the community.
My full name is David Philip White, and I'm a member of the Bear Clan here at Akwesasne. My Mohawk name is Sagotnagiliosta, which is kind of a tongue twister, but it's my Mohawk name, and I've heard different interpretations of what it means, but in a sense it means kind of makes you think, kind of entertaining your mind in a way. That's how it was expressed to me. I live here in the Akwesasne community. I live on the American side. I mean, I don't know if you know the geography, but I live on the southern portion, which is the American portion in New York State. If you acknowledge those borders, I mean, if you consider that many people see us as one nation, one Mohawk nation, the borders were imposed long after we were here. I think I was about 11. Yeah, 11. Yeah. I had just been playing Little League Baseball for a couple years, and I think Rob and Laura and Wally and Grace, they said, well, he can hit a bat, he can hold a bat. And I played hockey, so they said I could, play hockey. So I think they said, why not lacrosse? And they gave me that stick, and it made a world of difference for me.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
It's pretty touching, and I owe a great deal to them, to Rob Cree and his wife Laura and Wally Roundpoint for giving me that first stick, and to know that it goes back to the Chisholm Roundpoint lacrosse factory where I used to come and visit and see the sticks made and smell the aromas and see the guys working and laughing and just enjoying what they were doing. It was like a labor of love for them. And then knowing later on, as I got to go to prep school and go to college, to see where these sticks were actually going and say, hey, I know that stick. I know where that came from. I lived there, and that was pretty special for me. I would be remiss to say that I am, because I don't know for sure. I mean, a lot of the whites in our community are related somewhere down the line, but I wouldn't consider him like a great uncle or anything like that. Not that close, but we could very well be related. And it was indeed it was nice to go to school and say, John White, he's from the same community that I'm from. Where all these lacrosse sticks that come from, that's where he lives, and that's where I live. So he was quite a legend, and he traveled all over New England and the United States and Canada playing lacrosse, and he was considered probably the greatest lacrosse player from here, from what I'm told. And for me to go to prep school and kind of follow the same pathway that he went was really special for me, to play in the Mid-Atlantic, and play in the Heroes Tournament. The Heroes Tournament has a trophy that's called the John White Trophy, and they have another name for it too, but I call it the John White Trophy because that's what it is. It's a bust of a Mohawk player, and it's John White, and we played for that tournament back in '72 when I was at Brown, and we went down to play in the Heroes Tournament down in Baltimore. There were 4 teams there, and I think it was Brown, Virginia, it might have been maybe Hopkins and one other Maryland team, one other Baltimore team, and we played, and it was just so special that trophy was there, and I said, that's where I'm from. I know John White, I know who he is, I know where he's from, I should say. I didn't know him, but I know where he comes from, because that's where I come from too. Yeah. Well, it was kind of related to my handicapping condition, because both of my older brothers, like many of the other Mohawk men, were iron workers. And because I lost my fingers at age 6, and they were also in the services. One was Army, one was Navy. But my mom and dad realized that would never be my path, because I couldn't do the manual stuff. So they always encouraged me to do well in school, and I did well in school, particularly in elementary school. And then when I went to junior high, it was about the time that the ABC program came into being. ABC stands for A Better Chance. And what that was a foundation that came about to help promising students of color be placed into prep schools throughout New England. And so I took the secondary school admissions test. I didn't know what it was all about. My guidance counselor, who's also native, Dr. Solomon Cook, he's a Cornell graduate. He spoke to my mom, and we said, we need to do something to help Dave. And this program might be the ticket, because what you want is what he can get by going to prep school. And what my mom wanted was for me to get an education so I wouldn't have to be involved with manual labor, so I could get a, quote, desk job. And so going off to prep school was a very large decision for me, and it made a huge difference in my life. And I owe a great deal to my mom for making that decision, because as a handicapped kid, I went away, I think I was 12. As a handicapped kid, you know, as a mom, you're overly protective, but she was willing to take the chance to say, okay, we need to do something that's going to be in his best interest down the road, and we're going to have faith that this prep school experience will work out for him. So at 12 years old, sending me off to a private boarding school in Massachusetts, which is 6 hours away, must have been a heck of a decision for her to wrestle with. It's one thing if a kid goes whole, but I wasn't whole. And so for her to make that decision, for me to go, it was really an act of love, and I can't thank her enough for that, because it's made such a big difference in my life. When I went away to prep school, that's the one thing that came with me from our community was my lacrosse stick, and it was my best friend. I mean, it was lonely down there, and when you live in a reservation community, everybody is so tight-knit and friendly, and you know everybody, you wave to everybody. And it was a much smaller community then than it is now, so you knew even more. So for me to go away and to be totally isolated from that cocoon, let me call it a cocoon, was really hard. It was daunting. But the lacrosse stick with me in my hand was, like I said, my travel companion, my friend, and my medicine. Because whenever I felt lonely, or if I met somebody who had a lacrosse stick, automatically we would play catch, or we would, talk about his lacrosse background, I'd talk about mine, and of course, being a Native American, being Mohawk, they wanted to know more about the reservation community and lacrosse and what it was like there. My nicknames, as I said, my lacrosse stick here shows my nickname, actually my Mohawk name for David is Dowie, so that's on my stick. In prep school and at Mount Herman, because my name is Dave White, my nickname was Whitey. And that's kind of an unfortunate nickname for a person of color. And what made it even worse was when I went to this program through ABC that I alluded to, the ABC A Better Chance program, it was mostly students of color, which meant that it was probably 85–90% black. So for me to have a nickname Whitey was just not, I mean, I get it. There's just Smith, there's a Smitty, and Jones is Jonesy, and White becomes Whitey. But if you're a person of color and they're calling you Whitey on the field and you're being covered by a black defenseman and the goalie's black, I played against this guy, Louis Green, from University of Pennsylvania, and they're looking at me, how come they're calling you Whitey? So I said, oh, Dave White, Whitey, and the whole thing, Smith, Smitty. But those were my nicknames. To be honest, I was a little more advanced stick handling wise than some of the guys that I started playing with. This was back in the mid-'60s. So the other thing about having the handicap was the coaches weren't on my back to go lefty-righty, because that was the thing. I mean, if you played lacrosse on Long Island, you had to go left, you had to go right, and the big shot of the day was the overhand bounce shot. That's all they were preaching, overhand bounce. And I said, well, that's fine, I can do that. And so I did that. But they didn't make me try to go right because of my hand. Right. The coaches knew that. But I would shoot differently because of my background from the reservation. And guys would shoot backhands and they would shoot underhand. And back then that was novel. Right. There were very few people. And you mentioned Ron Fraser earlier. I mean, he had a heck of an underhand shot. But there weren't a whole lot. So when I shot underhand, the coaches, anybody else, they would have said, no, that's not how you do it. You got to shoot overhand bounce. But for me, they gave me a little more latitude because of my situation, and I was able to shoot, from low to high, and it was relatively new back then. And when I got to Brown, even my first year on varsity was my sophomore year, because Ivy League rules said freshmen couldn't play varsity back then. I think it's still a rule. I'm not sure. So when I got to play at the university level and scored some goals low to high, it was like, whoa. Nothing wrong with this. And now you see it's the shot of the day. Everybody winds up and fires that thing. And a lot of it is the Canadian box players as well. And when I started playing field lacrosse, at Mount Herman, that's the first year I started playing organized lacrosse in our community. We used to go behind and play in the backyard of Rob and Laura Crees. We'd run up to the box in Huggan and play lacrosse out there. But when I started playing organized lacrosse, I played on the junior C team here. And my first coach was Peter Burns. I don't know if you know him. He's a legend. One of his trademarks is the fact that his head was kind of bent to the side, big burly guy. He was my first coach, and I played with him for about half a season, and then they moved me up to the junior B, which was coached by Frankie Benedict. And that's where I played with guys like Bruce Rompoint and Ernie Mitchell and Travis Cook, some of the guys who later played pro in the 75-76 Pro League. They played for the Montreal Quebecois, and Travis played for the Quebec Caribou. So it was some pretty good talent here and on one team for an Eastern Ontario team. And we thought we were pretty good. We played for the Castro Cup in 72. And we lost to a team from BC, so we were silver medalists for the Castro Cup. And there was a time during my junior year career where Jim Bishop was coaching the Oshawa Green Gaels, who were amazing at that time. They came out to play us in a 2-game total goal situation, and we split with them. So, I mean, we were okay, you know. I mean, the Oshawa Green Gaels were, you know, they were all that at that era. And we split with them in a 2-game total goal, and I think that's where Jim Bishop actually first saw Ernie Mitchell play, and Jim was later the coach for the Montreal Quebecois, and that's where Ernie was a stellar goalie. No, he's from Six Nations, so he's well. You mean was he on the Green Gaels? I think he might have been. He might have been. He might have been a little bit older because this is still junior. He might have aged out of playing against us. But yeah, there was a good run for the Oshawa Green Gaels. I mean, they were the talk of the town. Well, there were a number of players ahead of me. One guy was 2 years ahead of me, a guy named Jeff Riley, and he went to Brown. And then there was another couple of guys ahead of me, a year ahead of me, Don McLean. He went there, and I went down for a visit and knew those guys. They showed me around, and it was, you know, your freshman visit, so they showed me a pretty good time. And I said, I kind of like it here. And also I had a call from the coach, Cliff Stevenson, and all he said is, he called me up. He said, Dave White? He said, yeah. He said, Brown wants you. And for me, I didn't know a lot about Brown. I didn't even know Brown was Ivy League. You know, I thought Brown was out in the Midwest. I had no idea. Wow. That's how, I mean, that's how isolated we are up here. We didn't know a lot about that. In fact, when I told my mom and dad, I'm going to Brown, you know, oh, that's good. It was like I was going to, you know, Canton Community College. They didn't know the distinction. But being a high-powered academic D1 program, for him to say Brown wants you from a kid who wondered if he could hold a lacrosse stick when he first got it, to get a call from a D1 program that said, we want you. I said, I'm coming. I knew some guys that were on the team already from having played with them at Mount Herman, and they were my heroes. And we get to Brown, and I couldn't play on the varsity as a freshman because of the Ivy League rule, but my sophomore year, I was playing ahead of them. You know, I was on the first midfield, and they were on the second or third midfield, and I was like, wow. I was just flabbergasted, you know. I worked at Salmon River once I graduated from Brown. I came back, and coincidentally, it was the first year they were starting a varsity lacrosse program. I graduated in 75, and I came back and started working at Salmon River in the fall of 75. So in the spring of 76, it was the first year that we had a varsity lacrosse program, and I was the coach, and I coached there for 33 years. Oh, wow. So what's cool about that is I always remember my experiences going away to school and knowing the challenges that were there, but also knowing that it was a great opportunity for other students as well. So in my job, I was like a counselor. The title of the position was homeschool coordinator. And what I was designed to do was to provide liaison between the school community and the reservation community, because there was some mistrust there. There was some racism that was there. And so I was kind of the buffer in between. And initially, when I started doing that, a lot of it was kind of negative. It would be your son or daughter is missing too many days of school. Your son or daughter's grades are, way below what they should be. So what I did, and not just me, but the program I worked for in another program called Upward Bound, is we kind of, brainstormed, how can we turn this around? And in doing that, what we did is we put together some incentive programs to get the kids to attend school more regularly, to try to achieve higher grades. And in doing that, I remember Mount Herman for myself, knowing that you had to have good grades to go there in order to win a scholarship to go there. So I used to take kids down to Mount Herman to visit the campus that I went to. And I bet there's been probably 50 kids from our community who've gone there. Wow. My two daughters have gone there. I have a niece who's gone there, and just a handful of people who've gone there. And many have come back to the community. So it was a good investment because it's improved our community. I mean, they're in some of the leadership roles, the administrative roles that govern, the government and oversee the community, its welfare and stuff. So I'm always pretty proud about that. In fact, one of the things I got is an award from the National Education Association, and it was for Counselor of the Year because of the number of kids that we had that were graduating, and the number of kids that got accepted into post-secondary programs. So I mean, that was the goal, and that doesn't really speak to the kids who went to prep school. Hey, Louis, it's more about having the kids go on to college and go to the next level to get that training and education that they would need. It was a nice part of the program because you got to know your classmates, your teammates who were in your same year for a whole year, and it was like that. So you played the freshman team from Princeton, from Cornell, all the Ivies that were playing. Everybody was playing except for Columbia. Yep. So that was our league, and we played against them. And again, you got to know the kids your age, so to speak, young men your age. And so the next year when we got to play varsity, it was a nice foundation. It was a nice introduction to not have to go, the top caliber lacrosse right off the bat. It was a good transitional situation. Okay, well, I have a couple things in here that speak to that. When I was at Brown, we won the Ivy Championship in 1973. Wow. And our record in the Ivy League was 6-0. And this is like a couple years before Cornell went on that monster run where they were national champs for 3 years in a row. We were the last team to beat them. And in this picture, you can see that's myself right here, and right next to me is Dom Starja. He's been quite a figure in the sport of field lacrosse. Yeah. So that was definitely a highlight. And in '73, I was on the first team, all Ivy team, and all New England team. So those were nice. And I was also named by my peers as one of the midfielder of the decade. So in the '70s, that was pretty special to be named midfielder of a midfielder of the decade for the whole day. Yeah. So that was pretty cool. Had a great time playing at Brown, and it was just a fun bunch of guys. I still play with a couple of them. Dom, I mentioned, we played together in Lake Placid, and this other attackman, Steph Russo. So we're still active, which is kind of unbelievable that we're still playing lacrosse at our age and having a good time with it and remembering the good old days and the games, and it's just a fun time. And when I finished up at Brown in '75, I was selected to play in the North-South All-Star game, and we had a terrific game. And as I mentioned to you earlier, I ended up scoring the winning goal against Roddy Ruhlman. Yep. Hot Roddy in the nets. I remember it was kind of an odd situation because we were into the third overtime of this game that was knotted at 24-24, and there was a line change, and I went running on the field, and for some reason the other team didn't have a guy running on the field with me, so I got to run in, and the attackman, I think he was the player of the tournament, Phil Marino, saw me, and his eyes got about this big, passed the ball to me, and I got to walk in one-on-one with Roddy Ruhlman. So I threw a couple fakes, and then I crossed it over and threw it in this way, which we now call an Australian, because after college I played with the Iroquois Nationals, and when we went to Australia, some of the guys would do that. They would pass, instead of switching hands, they would just cross over this way and kind of sort of like a backhand, forehand kind of thing, a crossover. So that's how I scored on Roddy and ended the game. So that was pretty cool. Well, we were down in Baltimore for some exhibition games, and we played Hobart and Cornell, and I think or maybe it was Syracuse. It could have been Syracuse. And they were two. No, I think it was Cornell. They were two very good teams from the time. You know, Hobart was the perennial Division II champion. I don't know how many years in a row they won that. But we played them, and we got spanked. We got beat badly. And really, it was because we didn't have the experience. There were only a handful of us on the team that had any field lacrosse experience at all. Most of the guys were converted box players and, you know, didn't know a lot of the schemes, you know, the riding, the clearing, things like that. We're used to playing fast break lacrosse, fast break box lacrosse, up and down, not knowing how to really slow the game and manage the game a little bit. So we were at a disadvantage. And talented-wise, you know, covering guys that could go both hands was kind of new for us too. You know, for our defenders, you know, we're used to, okay, he's going to go left, he's going left, maybe he's going to throw a backhand, but we didn't think he was going to switch hands and cut back the other way. So again, you know, they were way further along in their field lacrosse than we were, and we were quick studies though. The Iroquois Nationals were quick studies, very talented group of young men and coaches, and we adapted well. And I think it was in '88 when we were down in Maryland, when, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's when it was. The beginning of it, yeah. That's when we were having the exhibition games to see if we had the manpower to field an Iroquois national team. And so when it looked evident that we did, we just needed some time together. And that was always a problem with the Iroquois Nationals, is that our players are, you know, spread apart so much so that it's hard to have unified practices, you know. And not only that, but it was always conflicting with box lacrosse. You know, it was always like, do I want to play box? Do I want to play field? You know, and most of the guys always want to play box. You know, I think still today that's the preferred game is box. And so we adapted and got better as the years go by. And I think we're definitely contenders for the gold coming up. And I don't know what's going to happen with the Olympics, if they're going to go with the 6-on-6. But I think that tends to help our situation because we have a smaller pool. You know, I mean, the U.S., Canada, and some of the other countries have large a pool of talent to draw from, whereas our community numbers are much smaller. So if you shrink the field and you shrink the size, you're coming closer to box lacrosse in terms of the numbers. On the size of the field and numbers, it's very much like box lacrosse. And I think that will help us in the long run. You know, it'll be interesting. I mean, maybe we won't, you know, we can't field, you know, 20 strong players. Well, we can field 20 strong players, but competitive players with some of the, like the U.S. and Canada. But you get to, you know, 10 or 12, we might be right there. You know, and, you know, I don't know what they're going to do with the goals. If they're going to leave the goals, you know, 6x6, they start shrinking the goals down. And I think some of our goalies from box will adapt to that quite readily. So we'll see how that goes. And hopefully we get to play. I'm not sure if it's official that we're going to get to play or not. I know we're invited. We weren't going to play in the World Lacrosse Championships in Birmingham, Alabama. Then Team Ireland stepped up, and they said, "Hey, take our place. This is wrong that these guys aren't involved in this tournament. You can't have a world tournament and not include the native players."
It was beautiful.
It was beautiful. It was really, as active sportsmanship, it was incredible. We went and played in Manchester, England. Went back the year I played as a player. It was all in Manchester, and then we went back a second time, and we went back to Manchester again, and then we went to Australia, and it was more like a tour. We flew into Sydney, and we played in Melbourne. We played in Adelaide, and then we went out to Perth on their west coast. Reminded me of Vancouver a lot, Perth, Australia. But anyway, that's where we played those games. And so I got to see I say quite a bit of Australia, but not really. I mean, Australia is a vast continent. And, you know, we got to see some of the urban centers and met some of the Aboriginal people out there who just were great hosts for us. The Australians in general, but in particular the Aboriginal people, knowing that we were Indigenous as well, we had wonderful times with them, you know, wonderful receptions. And, you know, they were at our games and, you know, cheering us on. It was really quite nice. Canada has certainly made its mark in the world, that's for sure, both in the box and the field. This is the stick I used when I played with the Iroquois Nationals back in '88, '90, around those eras. My number 11's on there, and my Mohawk name, David, or Mohawk name is Dowie. That's on there as well. It's a brine stick because brine was one of our sponsors back in the day, and I think this is a brine edge from that era. And I've hung on to it because we've traveled together quite a ways. You know, we've gone to England, we've gone to Australia. So it's one of the only sticks that I have. I've had many over the years, and unfortunately, I no longer have the stick that Wally Rompoint gave me, but it certainly has served me well over time. Well, you say that women haven't been involved long, maybe perhaps in the game itself,
Right.
but they've been behind the scenes. I mean, there was a huge cottage industry here.
Oh, with the stick making.
With the stick making,
Yes,
with the Chisholm
yes.
Round Point Lacrosse Factory, because a lot of the sticks, the pockets were put in by women.
Yes.
In fact, you know, when I was in prep school and started playing field lacrosse, I would come to the factory and pick out the frame that I wanted, you know, and feel the balance. But it's hard to judge until you have a pocket in there. But I would try to figure out the best frame that I could find that met my needs. I liked the rounded head back then. And back in those days, there were a lot of heads that were squared at the top. Mm-hmm. But I thought for picking up the ball and using an Indian pickup on a loose ball, the rounded head worked much better.
Yeah.
But I used to take it, and in fact, I took it to Ernie Mitchell's mother. She used to string sticks for me, as well as one of my former goalies, Chuggo Jacobs. His wife, Kathleen, used to string my sticks. So I'd have a custom-made stick every year, you know, anytime I wanted. I mean, usually they last more than a year, of course, but I had a tendency to give some of those away because they were so treasured.
Yeah.
You know, I used to hear stories about teams from like Johns Hopkins and the University of Virginia. They would go to Backrack Rosin in Baltimore,
Yes.
and they'd have different levels of sticks by floor.
Yeah.
You know, and they would send all the top teams, you know, like the Naval Academy, Army, and Hopkins and Virginia. They'd go to the top floor and get the best sticks. And then the other schools that weren't quite as proficient at that point would come along and get whatever was left. Yeah, but, you know, I felt like, well, I'm in a fantastic spot because I could go right here to Cornwall Island and pick up the stick of my dream, basically. Yeah. It was quite an industry back in the day when lacrosse was just growing in Canada and the United States, as well as, you know, other countries, particularly England and Australia. And I have to tell you, when I went to the factory on Cornwall Island, I used to see boxes, you know, that were, you know, packaged for shipping. And I look at some of the addresses, and it was, you know, British Columbia and, you know, Toronto, and then Adelaide, Australia, and Long Island, and, you know, England, London, England.
You supplied the world from here. 90% of it.
90%, yes. And for me, it was the start of a dream, because I said, boy, I wonder what it's like to be in those places. Being from the reservation community here, I had hardly ever left the reservation. I went to the county fair in Malone, but that was it.
Right.
You know, I hadn't been anywhere. So to see those, and until you read about kangaroos and high tea at noon and things of these in other countries, and it just seems so far away and so far removed from my universe. Yeah. But through lacrosse, I was able to see those very places, and I thought that was pretty cool, because that's where it started here on Cornwall Island. Yeah. In fact, the first stick I ever got, it was given to me when I was about 11 years old. What happened was, to my neighbors, Ronnie and Robbie Cree, their parents, Rob and Laura, Laura's sister was married to Wally Rompoint, who is the son of Frank Rompoint, one of Frank Rompoint's sons. So the first stick I ever got, it was the twins' birthday in April. So sticks were being, you know, it was springtime, so sticks were in abundance. So Wally brought over 2 sticks to give to his twin nephews. And to my amazement, he reached into the trunk and pulled out a 3rd stick, and he handed it to me. And it was really a special gift. I mean, I remember feeling the stick and smelling the lacquer and you know, just smelling the leather and the gut wall and looking at the craftsmanship, you know, of the hickory, the way it was formed, the way it was carved to perfection, and knowing that it was made by my Mohawk brethren, you know, because I'd seen them. I went to the factory and saw them. And being a handicapped person, I wondered, how can I play? You know, can I learn this game? You know, because I used to go to the lacrosse box in Hogansburg in the 60s, and I watched some of the greats play. I saw Abe Thomas play. I saw Angus Thomas play, Angus George, you know, just a whole host of players that you know, are in the Hall of Fame in Ontario now, for example. And I saw them play, and I said, oh boy, these are my heroes. And when I got that stick, we used to run up to the box and pretend we were any one of those guys. In fact, two of my coaches, Frank Benedict and Pete Burns, they were my early coaches, and I used to say, I'm Frankie Benedict, you know, and I'd be running down trying to score the goal, and it was like that. And that's, it was really special. It was a special time. So that was my introduction to the game. And it was really, really kind of heartwarming. And looking back, it makes it even more special to see how it started for me. And the challenge, you know, as I mentioned, I do have a handicapping condition. I lost my fingers when I was 6 years old. So you would think that handling a lacrosse stick or anything like that might be out of my range. But luckily, I have enough grip to hold on to the butt end of the stick and learn how to, you know, stick handle and cradle, shoot and pass, and practice it and practice it and practice it, because in order to be as good as the next guy, it seemed like I had to work twice as hard, you know. And at that time, I didn't want to be pitied, you know, for being a handicap. I didn't want people feeling sorry for me. It got to the point where I felt that way at first. You know, I was always hiding my hand whenever I was in public, and I was very embarrassed and just not very secure about anything. I was really spiraling in a downward motion. But Rob Cree, as who I just alluded to, he was my Little League baseball coach, and we figured out a way that I could play baseball. I used to play center field. I'd catch the ball with my left hand, gloved hand. I'd put the glove under my arm, and I'd throw it in left-handed. But initially, I was right-handed. You know, when I was in first grade, I was right-handed and learning how to do everything right-handed, and then I had to make the conversion over. But it was interesting. But Rob taught me a lot, and he really helped my confidence a great deal through baseball. And I think Rob and Laura, they talked to Wally and Grace, the Round Points, and I think they saw that I was a kid in need, that I needed some help, I needed some support to get me through. So when Wally handed me that stick, he handed it to me and he said, take care of this stick and it'll take care of you. And of course, I didn't think much of it at the time. I said, oh, that's a nice thing to say, and I hope I can learn to play, learn to catch and handle the stick. And come to find out, it was really a prescription of medicine. And you know, people talk about lacrosse being a medicine game, and they cite different things that it's used for. You know, to honor elders, to helpfully aid in the recovery of someone who's ailing. It used to be used for other reasons as well, to settle disputes. But for me, it was a more personal medicine game because it gave me the power, I guess. It empowered me to be more confident in myself and in my skills as an individual, and to be able to stand shoulder to shoulder. And when I went away to prep school, what I really liked about it was the fact that you had to wear gloves. You know, when we were playing backyard lacrosse, it was all barehanded. You know, nobody had equipment, except for we put some stuff on a goalie to make a goalie. But nobody had gloves. But when I got to play organized lacrosse, you put on the gloves, you couldn't tell. And that was the world to me. You couldn't tell that I had a handicap condition. All you could see was what I could do running, passing, shooting, throwing, scoring, whatever. And that was leveled the playing field for me. And I owe a lot to lacrosse for that, because it leveled the playing field in my life. And lacrosse has been my friend. It's been my companion. It's been my medicine for my whole life. I still play. You know, it's amazing that here I am. I'm 60. I'll be 69 on Halloween, but I'm still playing. I just made contact to play in Florida this coming January. I play 2 tournaments. I play in Lake Placid in the Summit Lacrosse Tournament, and I play down in Florida in the Florida Classic on Martin Luther King weekend. So that's the extent of my playing and coaching and my refereeing. I did all those things, but it's so nice to get out there and throw the ball around and take my medicine. I love it. Yeah, I coached at Salmon River for 33 years, and we have had a very successful program, and the team is still doing quite well in our section. We're Section 10 in the New York State Athletic Association. So we're really right in the thick of things for the Section 10 championship, and if you win that, you go to intersectionals and you play other sections. Particularly, we would play Section 3, which was like the kiss of death, because it was Central New York. So that would be usually our first draw, and that was usually one and done. You know, but in the course of my coaching, we did win our first section and got to play the next round, and then I think we lost the next round. On 2 occasions, we lost to Section 3 in overtimes.
Wow.
We lost to Cortland. I don't remember the exact year, but Mike Bennett Jr. was playing, and Owen, his cousin, Adam Thompson, they were playing, and we took them to, I think, 4 overtimes before we lost, and they, of course, went on to become the eventual state champions.
Wow.
So we were that close. We were that close. We hit the crossbar, put one right over the crossbar that could have sent us on to the next round, and who knows. And then a couple years ago, we played against Skinny Atlas, and it was the same situation. And that's when I had the pleasure, and I say pleasure, of coaching Thompsons. Lyle, Miles, and Ty Thompson, they went to Salmon River. You know, most of the information people have is they're products of the Lafayette school system down by the Onondaga Reservation, but they were up here for a couple of years. In fact, they played a lot of their minor league box lacrosse up here. If you go over to the arena, you'll see pictures of Pee Wee teams, and you'll see, you know, Lyle and Miles playing on those teams. So we've always had a situation where we've attracted talented players from other communities to come here. And not just native players. I mean, when I was playing, I had a chance to play with John Davis, who was, you know, a perennial star from the Toronto area. You know, and then when we had a professional, a senior team, a senior A team here, you know, players like John Tavares came out here and played, and a whole host of players came out here to play. So it's been a nice place to be. I'm not anymore. No, I did. When I finished coaching at Salmon River and finished coaching with the Iroquois Nationals, I then became a referee. I refereed for a number of years, and I just retired last year, mainly because of COVID. I didn't want to wear a mask and blow a whistle and run around and be exposed to kids that were, you know, breathing heavy and coughing and sneezing, and I didn't want to do that at my age, you know. I said, I don't think so. And my grandkids are starting to get to the point where they're playing, so I wanted to see more of them play. So I hung it up. Yeah, it's been a great story, actually, and you know, I have a different appreciation for lacrosse as a medicine game because of my personal experience with it and how it's helped me. It's helped me stay strong. And keeps me strong now. As I said, I play in the 2 tournaments, and it's just enough where, you know, I got to run. You know, I have to stay in somewhat decent shape.
In order to,
yeah, if I want to keep playing, you know, it's good for your health, you know. And as I said, I thought if I would be doing anything now, I'd be playing lob ball, you know, like lob softball. But here I am playing lacrosse and loving it. And there's an opportunities to play all over. I mean, they have tournaments in Hawaii and Aspen, Colorado, and all over the world, the Berlin Open, and I'm sure there's a whole host of other tournaments that I'm not even mentioning or I'm aware of. But those are the 2 that are close to my heart because the guys that I played with play in those tournaments, for one thing. And the other is the tournament in Lake Placid. It's in our territory. It's in Mohawk territory. So that's a special flavor for me. I like that.